say that that was the case, but it's not.
Totally, just take that and just run with it and be like, oh yeah, that was our bad, no problem.
No, that's not going to work. Then I would, no, it's my fault.
Well, I've got another medium. So yeah, I've got two now. Can dick it out.
Doctor, we got plenty of swag for you. Don't worry.
Say that that was the case, but it's not.
Totally, just take that and just run with it and be like, oh yeah, that was our bad, no problem.
No, that's not going to work. Then I would, no, it's my fault.
Well, I've got another medium. So yeah, I've got two now. Can dick it out.
Doctor, we got plenty of swag for you. Don't worry.
Say that that was the case, but it's not.
Totally, just take that and just run with it and be like, oh yeah, that was our bad, no problem.
No, that's not going to work. Then I would, no, it's my fault.
Well, I've got another medium. So yeah, I've got two now. Can dick it out.
Doctor, we got for you. Don't worry.
Say that that was the case, but it's not.
Totally, just take that and just run with it and be like, oh yeah, that was our bad, no problem.
No, that's not going to work. Then I would, no, it's my fault.
Well, I've got another medium. So
right.
yeah, I've got two now. Can
We are live now.
dick it out.
We are live.
Doctor, we got for you. Don't worry.
Okay.
Am I
All right.
the one that's hearing that sound playback?
Say that that was the case, but it's not.
Totally, just take that and just run with it and be like, oh yeah, that was our bad, no problem.
Wait. Okay, we're all live.
No, that's not going to work. Then I would, no, it's my fault.
Well, I've got another medium. So
right.
yeah, I've got
All right. Okay, go ahead, Mike.
Okay. Let's get started. And I'm sorry if that was repeating anybody over and over, my bad joke. So those of you who don't know me, I'm Mike Kelly. I'm the General Superintendent and CEO of the Chicago Park District, and I want to welcome you all to this virtual town hall. It's the third in a special series put on by our Social Distancing Ambassador Program. Today is truly a special event with a number of distinguished speakers who are not only experts in their field, but these are leaders helping us through this pandemic and the fight against COVID-19. Among the esteemed presenters today are Dr. Alison Arwady, our city's public health leader, and Ms. Angela Rudolph, who's our Deputy Commissioner of Youth Services for the Chicago Department of Family and Sports Services, and she also oversees the Chicago Youth Service Corps. Today, you will learn about Operation Outbreak, or O2 as it's known. It's an innovative platform that integrates a STEM education academic unit with an experiential learning activity within a simulation. I want that for a mouthful. I want to thank Dr. Todd Brown and Dr. Pardis Sabeti from the Broad Institute at Harvard and MIT, who also will share their vast knowledge and information and leadership on all things parks, pandemic, etc. I also want to take a moment and thank Rihanna and her organization, the Clara Lionel Foundation, for their generous support of the social distancing intern program. Quite frankly, we could not have done this without them. And of course, the young women and men of the Social Distancing Ambassador Intern Program. I had the opportunity to interact with several ambassadors and learn firsthand about their experiences. It's great to see kids who've grown up in our parks and in our neighborhoods. They were campers, junior counselors, junior guards, and now they're becoming rec leaders and lifeguards. Now, our ambassadors are at parks all across the city, and they're on our lakefront. They actively engage park patrons and provide thoughtful insight and direction to community members about our city's health and our safety guidelines. Know that you guys play a critical role in helping keep all Chicagoans healthy and safe, and we at the Park District are incredibly proud of you. Now I want to introduce our moderators for the virtual town hall, Kayla and Kayla Williams, two incredible young women who also happen to be twin sisters. They are Park District lifeguards and social distancing ambassadors. As I pass it on, I want to congratulate them both on their high school graduation, and I want to wish them all the best of luck as they are college bound this fall. Thank you, and ladies, please take it away.
Hi everyone, my name is Kayla Williams, and in the fall I will be attending DePaul University as a Posse Scholar. And last summer, the Park District provided me and my sister with our first jobs working as lifeguards at 57th Street Beach, as he said. Moderating today with me, like he said, is my twin sister, Kayla Williams, and right. We are both 17 and recent graduates of Lindblom and are very excited for this pleasure today.
Hello, I'm Kara Williams, Kayla's twin, and I will be attending Emory University, located in Atlanta, Georgia, majoring in biology on the pre-medicine track. When we were younger, our parents put us in tons of sports, but swimming was the only one that stuck. Once we got to high school, we were introduced to water polo. We weren't the best water polo players, so our parents recommended that we go to Burgoyne Park to get better, and we did. Naturally, being surrounded by swimmers, we were able to, we wanted to be lifeguards when we turned 16. We were able to, thank you to the Park District. Coming into the summer, we were looking forward to doing that again, but with the pandemic, everything became uncertain. We were very relieved when the Park District gave us an opportunity to be social distancing ambassadors, as we knew that we learned more information about COVID-19 while staying fit. Since I'm going to school in Atlanta, which is a huge COVID hotspot, I'll be taking what I learned as a social distancing ambassador to promote social distancing and lead by example. Kayla will now go through the agenda for the town hall.
So in this town hall, we will have someone speaking from the Chicago Youth Service Corps today. We will acknowledge your feedback. Someone will speak on Operation Outbreak and a simulation results. There's going to be a time where a Q&A will happen and you will be able to ask the experts questions. A message will come from the mayor, and then we will have a couple of closing announcements.
Thank you, Kayla. So yesterday, my sister and I had the pleasure to speak to the mayor at Harrison Park, along with 4 other social distancing ambassadors. And here's the video for that.
I would say that the summer has been different. You do have to approach people in a different manner than you would on a normal basis, because we've been here and we see people playing on the playground and we're like, you have to go, and they're like, well, why? Like, it's a playground, and it's just like, you have to go, like, this is a serious matter and we can't play around.
It's been interesting. And I would say to approach people kindly. Some people don't understand that this virus is real, and they still have that it doesn't affect me mentality.
People even ask us what are you doing? Are you a janitor or are you a lifeguard? And we're like, no, we're social distancing ambassadors. That kind of reminds them oh, social distancing, we're public, we need to be doing this.
The social distance ambassadors, great kids, great to have. We're very fortunate to have them here at Harrison Park. I think it's a win-win for everybody involved. It's a win-win for these young adults, win-win for the community, win-win specifically for Harrison Park, as well as the Chicago Park District as a whole, as they communicate and educate the safe areas of the park.
Now going to school, I have something to say. Well, in Chicago, they came up with a cool thing called social distance ambassadors, who advocate to promote goodness and wellness of COVID-19 and what people should be doing just in case if they don't know. It gave me a learning tool to take in the fall in school. What a great video that explains what we do in the field and how we feel about it. Next, we're going to have Angela Rudolph speak. As a proud Southsider and lover of all things Chicago, Angela has worked within the city policies, advocacy, nonprofit, and civil service landscapes as a way to learn from, influence, and impact both the strengths and challenges for her beloved home. Currently, she serves as Deputy Commissioner for Youth Services at the city's Department of Family Support Services. I am pleased to welcome Angela Rudolph.
Hey, thank you so much for that introduction, Kayla. Good afternoon, everybody. As Kayla indicated, my name is Angela Rudolph, and I'm Deputy Commissioner for Youth Services at DFSS. You have no idea how excited I am to come and talk to all of you today, particularly because each one of you is a representation of an incredible accomplishment. You all are members of the City of Chicago's first paid youth service program, the Chicago Youth Service Corps, or CYSC. CYSC started as a way to engage young people like yourselves in the City of Chicago's response to COVID and other community service focused work. CYSC allows you all to earn money while you support your neighborhood and city. And as was indicated, this is literally one of the only programs in the country providing this opportunity at this scale. This year, we're supporting over 2,200 young people, and the social distancing ambassadors, every one of you on this call, are the biggest program under that umbrella, totaling almost 700. I know the past few months have been really challenging for everyone. It changed a number of the plans that you probably had in place or what you expected to be doing. You are unfortunately not able to go to graduations, family events, or trips that you had planned. New jobs that you maybe had anticipated ended up changing. And so when my team and I and others in the city had conversations with young people like yourselves, one of the things that we heard over and over again was this appeal to make sure that city-sponsored summer jobs continued and did it in a way that allowed you to be able to do the things that you most cared about, things that impacted your communities, your families, and the city that you care so much about. As social distancing ambassadors, you all have been at the forefront of the city's efforts to keep our residents safe and healthy, even if many of them did not quite appreciate your efforts. And what I really want to say to you is that I and the others really want to thank you for the hard work, for the intentionality, and for your continued focus to make sure that people keep themselves and others around them safe and healthy with the advent of COVID-19. The weekly reflections that you've been doing, focusing on shaping Chicago, building your community and city, learning to lead, leading to learn, elevating your voice, building your community and your city, and celebrating yourselves and others are more than just abstract concepts that you all read about and talked about amongst yourselves. They're skills that you wrestled with, that you tackled in your daily interactions as SDAs and have integrated in how you see and navigate the world. Your work this summer as an SDA is, I'm sure, going to support and steady you in whatever you do going forward. And I also know you're now stronger leaders and advocates for yourselves, your families, your communities, and the issues that you're so passionate about. I believe your time with CYSC is just the beginning of spectacular futures that can strengthen Chicago's neighborhoods, communities, and our cities so that we can become a place where we can fulfill and sustain all for those who call her home. As the inaugural class of the Chicago Youth Service Corps, you will always be the foundation of great leaders who are supported and aided in not just having a better understanding of yourselves and your city, but also how you can mold the city in the image that speaks to your truth, your power, and the unique needs of your community. I'm both proud and excited to see what lies in our city's future and where you will take us all. Now, with that, I'm going to turn things back over to Kara.
Thank you so much, Angela. Next, we have Tim O'Connell, who will be sharing some social distancing ambassador feedback. Tim is the Deputy Chief Program Officer of the Chicago Park District. He is a dedicated public administration and park and recreation professional who has served the city of Chicago through the Chicago Park District for 20 years. In his role, Tim is responsible for the management of parks programs and people for one of the largest and most dynamic municipal recreation agencies in the world. Tim's role is focused on creating partnerships, and developing staffs while working with all Chicago neighborhoods and keeping community as the focus. Everybody, Tim.
All right, thank you very much. I'm happy to be here, and for all the social distance ambassadors and everybody else who's watching us on the Chicago Park District YouTube channel, wanted to give some feedback that we asked all of our social distance ambassadors. First, how will we make a meaningful impact on the city of Chicago this summer? So just to define who this group is, together this summer, it was 650 social distancing ambassadors across 145 neighborhood parks and 18 miles of lakefront. So our ambassadors were at 145 parks and all on the beach and the lakefront, covering 18 miles. Some of the questions that we asked you first were about your training prior to joining and doing your in-person work as a social distance ambassador. And here's the feedback that we got at a higher level on the survey that we asked you to fill out. 65% of you felt prepared as you did your role as a social distancing ambassador. 70% of you thought that the peer program, which was promote, educate, be an example, be a role model, and report, were model training, that this training was effective. 65% of you thought the Operation Outbreak curriculum, that's the curriculum that everybody was accessing on the My Shy, My Future platform, and brought to us by the Broad Institute, that this was a valuable tool for your social distance ambassador experience. Now let's move on to your observations, what you found in our parks and on the lakefront. You all reported here, and if you look on this survey, the percentages on the right are agree and strongly agree. So park visitors wore coverings and face masks. 55.8% of you agreed that that was happening. Park visitors kept a 6-foot distance and followed park safety guidelines. 63% agreed or strongly agreed to that. Park visitors stayed off playground equipment. 31% said that people agreed. And as we predicted, this was going to be one of our biggest challenges. And again, a thank you to the social distancing ambassadors who went in there, even though some people did not know why, or just wanted to make sure their kids still had a place to play. We know that you and our park staff repeatedly are educating folks on why playground equipment isn't safe at this time. So that's a very true fact, and it proved out by your responses. And then the last one is park visitors kept it moving. Here, it's a positive to see that 81% of our park visitors are using the trails, using the lakefront trail for the purposes of moving, which is what we asked them to do, and not congregating. So 81%. And again, that's feedback from our social distance ambassadors. Now we'll move on. We wanted to find out from you, what are the observations from your neighborhood, right? So this is where you live. And this didn't necessarily have to be the immediate park that you were staffed at, but just what you're seeing. And I think that was interesting to find that nearly 70% of you felt that you needed to remind friends or family to practice safe social behavior. That's wearing a mask and being socially distant, 6 feet of physical distance. And then in your neighborhood, were most people wearing face coverings? 52%, that's agree and strongly agree, said yes, okay? So, and then also, were most people following social distance guidelines? 48% of you said yes, right? That's agree or strongly agree. This is very good information to find out from our social distancing ambassadors, which again range from 16 years old to 24 years old. And then our last bit of data that we're going to share is what are the more observations in your neighborhood, and specifically, what does your neighborhood need, right? So from the responses we got from you, 44% said we need more access to personal protection equipment, mainly face masks. 50% said education is needed. 49, just under 50% said signage, more communication through signage. And then 35% said focus community conversations, having conversations about COVID and educating that way. And then just around 25% said, hey, my community is following safe social behaviors, then nothing is needed. So that's like 1 out of 4 communities felt that, or from our respondents, it was 1 out of 4. Again, this is one of the things, along with submitting questions for today's Q&A, that we asked our social distance ambassadors to do through the platform. And we appreciate your feedback and the story that it tells from your perspective, from the youth, from the social distance ambassador. So that was some survey feedback, and I want to turn it back over to our youth moderators.
Thank you so much, Tim, for taking our feedback and acknowledging our observations. Now I would like to introduce Dr. Todd Brown. Dr. Todd Brown is a teacher turned community outreach director for SMA and SMA Prep in Sarasota, Florida. He is a winner of multiple national and international Teacher of the Year and Innovator Awards. Dr. Brown is also the co-creator of Operation Outbreak and educational ambassador for the United Nations and educational ambassador for the Center of Disease Control, and is on the advisor board to Fulu Academy in Kenya, Africa. I present to you Todd Brown.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Chicago. Hey, listen, this was fantastic to be a part of. We were so excited. And every time we do something like this, as much as people that are involved in the program learn, we actually learn a lot more probably from the people that are involved. And this is no exception. So I want to run through real quick our Operation Outbreak app that we deployed about a week ago, and all the participants and the feedback that we actually got back from people that were participating. So what we did was we deployed the app. We ran this for 7 full days for the people that downloaded it. We offered up quizzes and different things for health scores, potentially earning masks and PPE to keep you protected. So I just want to jump in real quick again to explain what the data is that we received from everybody and what the lessons we learned from everyone in Chicago. So the first thing real quick is what the data means. So we have, when you see the dots in the next slide, we will have, that indicates different people. So if we look at the North region, all the different dots are the different people. Light blue, or it looks kind of grayish on the screen, those are people that did not get infected. Lime green are index cases. In other words, these are the cases that we as evil scientists randomly picked people around each region to infect to start the transmission chains. Red, or crimson red, which isn't even on this chart, is a community transmission. In other words, someone that infected another person within that region. And anytime you see a line that connects participants, that means that the app detected that you were close enough to actually transmit the pathogen between two people. So the North did an excellent job, and a lot of different people involved. So people were close, but either they weren't frequently close enough or for a duration long enough to actually transmit the pathogen. And you can look, some of these dots, there were people that were infected that were close enough to other people to spread it, but not for long enough and frequent enough. So the North did an excellent job here. Moving on to the Central region, we'll look at the same plot here as what we're looking at with the North, but different results. So if we could get the Central, there you go. So this just blows me away. So we randomly seeded people. We have a couple of people that started the infections. This is amazing. No transmissions and not even proximity close enough to even transmit the pathogen itself, which is incredible. It shows too that you're taking to heart what you're learning and you understand the importance of social distancing and how that affects the community. So moving on again here to the southern region. So south, here we go. So we've got, again, lots of players. We have some proximity. We actually have a transmission, a single transmission. If you look towards the top left, almost at 11 o'clock, there was a single transmission in all of this. So what we're seeing here is this. When you look at all 3 regions combined, we randomly seeded the population with an infection. We ran this for a week, and you've only had one community transmission amongst all of the people that did this. So again, this shows that you are taking things seriously and doing what is necessary to keep yourselves and others safe. So we cannot thank you enough for being a part of what we've tried to provide as an educational experience in Chicago. And I'll tell you this real quick before I go. When people are talking about what they're doing around the country or the world, and I hear it, it's amazing, and I go, you know what? Listen, you should see what Chicago's doing. This is just amazing what they're doing, and how they're responding is so just incredible. So thank you very, very much for your participation. And we're looking forward to hopefully continuing this in the future again. So thank you. I'll turn this back over to Kayla and we'll go from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Todd Brown. I just want to add that I got 100% and I earned all my masks and my PPE. So thank you for your app. But next, we're going to meet one of our expert panelists, Dr. Sabiti. Here's a video about her.
Early on when my research wasn't going that well and I was having trouble, people would be like, well, she's in a band. But then when my research started going well and I started publishing, they'd be like, wow, and she's in a band.
1, 2, 3, 4.
People think that you have to be one-dimensional to be a scientist, but actually your science gets better when you stimulate your creativity, your curiosity, all of that. So to me, actually, doing music helps me be a better scientist. I'm Pardis Sabeti. I'm a geneticist, and I'm a National Geographic Emerging Explorer. I use math to dissect the genomes of viruses, to decode them and understand how they evolve, how they spread, and ultimately how to prevent infectious disease and prevent outbreaks. An outbreak is an infectious disease that's gotten out of control. And think of it like a wildfire. And you never really know where one will start, but you need to detect it. And you need to contain it before it gets out of control. That's what my work does for infectious disease. You know, one of the tools that we've created is an outbreak simulation that's spread over Bluetooth from phone to phone for middle schoolers to get to experience what an outbreak might be like, but before a real life event. So, you know, we created this tool to be able to educate and, you know, have outreach to students, but really we learned as much from them as anything else. You know, their participation taught us about how people respond to outbreaks, and like their ingenuity, their thought process during the outbreak taught us so much. I love working in outbreaks because it requires cooperation. It requires people working together, collaborating, and that's how you win. And it's sort of the way I like to think about the world. I'm in a band. I'm not a singer-songwriter. I like being part of a collective. It's where the best things come together.
All right, there we go.
Hello. Do I just say it's okay? I'm still getting my Zoom comfort level going. Well, it's a real pleasure to be here and get an opportunity to speak. I think should I just start talking, or is that so excited to be here, excited to be wearing my swag, and my hat. Oh, it was getting a little hot, but I'll put it back on. And I just mainly want to say thank you guys so much for the opportunity to work with you guys and to learn from you. We've just been so fired up about this since we started. And I literally tell everybody about what you guys are doing and our opportunity to be involved in the work that you're doing. I think it's so, it's so right on. And just thank you, Kayla. Thank you, Kara. I'm really excited about you guys going to college and be interested to see what that college experience is going to be like for you and for all of you guys. But I think that there is a way in which we can come back together, but it does really require that teamwork amongst everybody. And I love the way that you guys are thinking through this. And I know that I'm just, and I can keep talking about anything, or I can take the questions that I know there's some that had for me. I don't know how would be best to go next. Do you want me to give a spiel, or do you want me to? And I have talk. I have some different components, but whatever you guys want.
Actually, do a spiel for like 8 minutes. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Then we go. All right. Well, I will give a spiel. Here we go. So I'm gonna talk to you a little bit more about. So I've got my CPS spiel ready to go. Okay. All right. Yeah, so I'm going to kind of give you a little bit of a landscape of how we think about outbreaks here and how Operation Outbreak fits into it. And it's funny because I've given a talk like this for many, many years. And now it's sort of harder. It's one of those things where when I used to explain it, I had to kind of make a case for this. And now it's a little bit of like, everyone knows you do this, but I like to kind of put the larger frame together. And I've been involved in outbreaks from Ebola to Zika to outbreaks of mumps and hepatitis throughout the US and around the world. One of the places that was most where we learned everyone tells a story, everyone teaches us. And one particular one that was really interesting to us and is connected to schools is an outbreak of mumps that ended up spreading through Harvard University in 2016. Basically, a group of us got impaneled when we started seeing mumps popping up on the sports teams that went into freshman dining hall and commencement. And there was the cases started going everywhere through the school, to the residential colleges, to the freshman dining hall where staff were infected in addition to students, health services where nurses were infected, and a commencement event in which ended up seeding an outbreak in East Boston. Later, our genomic sequencing data showed us that cases that emerged in an immigrant community in East Boston were connected to cases at Harvard. And one of the things that sort of, if you look at what traditional epidemiology does, traditional epidemiology is like calling up and saying, okay, who are you in touch with? What went on here? How are these two cases related? And it's really good. And the folks at Harvard and in other schools in Boston did a really good job of finding a number of connections between different cases. But when we actually overlaid the genome sequencing data, the genomic data, we saw all of these connections that were missed. The neat thing about a genome of a virus is it's a barcode that essentially tracks it and changes in time. And so we were able to see, we were actually missing all of. What was nice is that traditional epi is actually pretty good. Like if two people are on the same sports team and they both have mumps, they probably gave it to each other and they have the same virus or very close, but it misses a lot. And so we started at that point really thinking about the fact that we needed to bring mobile applications to increase the ability to do tracking. And so that's sort of like one example of kind of the story of the types of things we're doing, was we're trying to track these outbreaks and how they spread. And we really started thinking about the importance of being able to detect viruses wherever they happen, in rural clinics or in regional centralized labs in cities, to be able to connect that information in real time across a grid, and then to engage individuals, to how to get people to come to attention. And then from there, empower every actor in the system. And so when we talk about detect, these are sort of some of the things, if you think about all of the viruses that you might have heard about in the news, like Zika emerging, actually, you probably heard about it a few years ago, but Zika first emerged in 1947. We've known about it for decades. Ebola in 1976, even SARS and the SARS-like virus that we're talking about, we've known about for 2 decades. And so for the vast majority of these, we could develop ways of testing them in the field, like PCR, basic testing. Hold on, one second. Hey, Nolan, just want you to know I'm giving a talk here. So yeah. Okay, good. All right, sorry about that. This is the home. So we really need to have like new diagnostics that we can move out into the field, things that are field deployable, inexpensive, fast, programmable. One of the types of technologies that I've been really excited about over the last years is CRISPR. CRISPR you may have heard of because it is sort of transforming molecular medicine, but it was originally identified as a bacteria's immune system to viruses. It's able to identify a virus, pull down a protein that then cuts that virus. And there's a way that we've been able to turn that into a diagnostic. We can pair that cut with a signal, a fluorescent signal that will tell you a virus is present, and it'll create an assay. And we call this Sherlock. And in full disclosure, I'm a co-founder of a company that's trying to move this type of technology into the field. But but this is a passion that we're trying to do across the world. And this is sort of one of the things we've just created is something called SHINE, which is an integrated system to be able to detect SARS-CoV-2 that goes all the way from a nasal swab to a readout at room temperature with we're moving to room temperature and reading out on your cell phone. So that's the kind of dream. We also want to be able to detect lots of things at the same time. So we've created a system, a microfluidic system that is paired with CRISPR that allows you to test hundreds of viruses simultaneously and to look for lots of different things. So this is just some of the types of data that we look at, but it's like every virus versus every target. And you see something that really picks up the virus and nothing else. And that's the kind of technology we try to build. We also do sequencing. So this is data from the SARS-CoV-2 virus in Massachusetts, where we see this conference that ended up leading to a big explosion of cases in Massachusetts, or a particular virus that went right all the way through a nursing home, a congregate living facility, and was able to suddenly take over where 90% of the population got it. And the sequencing data shows you that. It shows you how connected all these individuals are. But it also shows you that there are more than 30, and now we count them over 80 introductions into Massachusetts, that it is able to tell you how it's happening again and again. And we're developing all sorts of these kinds of technologies across something called the mass CPR, and across the world, people are trying to develop new technologies to do this. Then we want to connect that information in real time. Our own team has built capacity across West Africa. We work in Nigeria, Sierra Leone, Senegal, and Liberia, and we've set up sequencing capacity in 3 of those countries and helped support it in Liberia. And we've set up diagnostic labs across the region too, and are trying to connect that information. We've created, our partners and us have created a suite of tools and technologies to be able to identify viruses in real time and to connect contact information. One of them is called Scout. It's a mobile application that allows you to put in your symptoms and track them over time, put in your friends, be able to tell your friends what if you're sick, and together figure out what's making each other sick. It can say, so somebody in your network was diagnosed with flu, you might want to get tested for flu. So we were building this before COVID. Works for COVID too, but it works for anything where if somebody in your system has symptoms, you can together try to figure out what's going on. And then dashboards that connect that information so that you can look at things globally and you can look at things locally or on your mobile phone, and to really understand what's happening. And then Empower, that comes to a lot of where we sort of got to Operation Outbreak, is that our group is really passionate about working with students and learning from students, as Todd said. And this is a program through the African Center of Excellence of Genomics of Infectious Disease. It's a handful, but it's a grant that my partner Christian Happy and I got from the World Bank to launch this education program. We've now trained over 900 people from countries around the world, mainly from West Africa, but throughout Africa and elsewhere in the world. And these deep training programs in diagnostics, bioinformatics, and genomics. And then, one of the things that we also partnered with is with middle school. So Todd Brown reached out to me about 5 years ago. And as you can tell, he's such a compelling human that immediately got captivated and on board and with these students, and building these apps. Andres Calubri, a postdoc in my lab, now faculty, was building those mobile technologies in the real world, and we thought we could bring this technology in for an educational tool. And what is, as Todd has showed you, is what's so terrific about this is just that you can really generate real world data and see all that's going on. We recently won a prize from the Audacious Project. This is through the organization called TED, to bring all these pieces together to really detect viruses wherever they occur, connect that information in real time, and empower every actor in the system. And so we got this grant just in February of 2017. We've been working on it for a while. And so we learned it just as COVID hit. So wish we'd had more time to set things up, but this money has been critical, and the support has been critical to make this happen. So that's just a little bit of what we do. This is the lab that does it. These are the folks in my lab who make this all happen. And this is our holiday card from last year, but you can see that we kind of commit to excellence in everything that we do. It started off as like a small, fun card to just send around, and turns into a massive production every year. And with a front and a back and all the insert cards and things like that. But this is, as that video shows, this science is really a team sport, and really only happens because of this. You want to find a good crew to do it. There we go.
Thank you, Sabeti, for the insight and outbreaks and showing us your research and data. Next, Next, I'm going to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Awiti. She is the commissioner of the Chicago Department of Public Health. Dr. Arwady started at the CDPH in 2015 and served as chief medical officer before being confirmed by the city council as commissioner in January of 2020. As chief medical officer, she oversaw the disease control, environmental health, emergency preparedness, and behavioral health divisions. She has worked on disease outbreaks, immunization promotion, tuberculosis response, lead poisoning prevention, substance misuse, and more. Prior to the CDPH, she worked for the U.S. Center of Disease Control and Prevention as an epidemic intelligence service officer. In that role, she focused on outbreak response, including international work on Ebola and Middle East respiratory syndrome. While based at the Illinois Department of Public Health, she responded to disease outbreaks across the state. Dr. Awiti has a bachelor's degree from Harvard University and a master's degree in public health from Columbia University, and completed her medical school and clinical training at Yale University. She is a board certified internal medicine physician and pediatrician and continues to see primary care patients weekly. I present to you Dr. Awiti.
All right, thank you. I want to first of all say I really enjoyed having a chance to get to meet you briefly yesterday and some of the other folks. And thanks to everybody who's on. Really have been so pleased to hear about the work that you've all been doing, particularly around the social distancing part. I love my hat, and it's really an opportunity to see how particularly younger people in Chicago have stepped up in all kinds of important ways to get the messaging out about COVID-19. And I have worked on a lot of different outbreaks. I've worked for the CDC a few different times in a few different roles. And initially, was very interested in tuberculosis. And if you work on tuberculosis, that might mean you end up working outside the US, because although we have tuberculosis here, it's a much bigger problem in some other parts of the world. And so had done quite a bit of work with tuberculosis and HIV, but then really have come closer back to home here in Illinois and in Chicago. I also really just enjoy thinking about outbreaks. I know I love that you've been learning about this, because hopefully some of you will get intrigued in the same way that I did when I first started studying epidemiology, which is the science of public health and of the way that outbreaks can spread. And the really interesting thing about outbreaks is once you learn the basics of outbreak response, whether it's a tiny outbreak with a few patients, maybe around a ear piercing clinic, whether it's a medium-sized outbreak of a disease after people run one of these big mud races, or whether we see an outbreak in a prison or in a school, whether it's a really big outbreak like an Ebola outbreak or Middle Eastern respiratory syndrome, or now COVID, the way that we actually approach it is quite similar. And people often think about the cases, the people who get sick. And you have to think about what are you going to do for the people who get sick? You have to make sure that you can diagnose them. You have to make sure that you can treat them. You have to make sure that they are getting the care that they need. But then also, in addition to that clinical care, you have to think about the work of containment. What are you doing to stop the spread of disease? That's kind of the fundamental work of public health. But more than that, you have to think about coordination, which is everything that happens behind the scenes with all of the different agencies and groups and people who need to have information. And then finally, you have to think about communication. And communication is, to my mind, one of the hardest parts of any outbreak, because you have to have lots and lots and lots of different people who have different backgrounds, different priorities. You have just the general public who need to have some understanding of what's going on. And then you have to do a lot of correcting of misinformation, because whenever there's an outbreak, people very naturally are scared. They're often looking to understand or sometimes to blame. There's often a lot of especially early on, we're still sometimes learning about how things spread. And it's important to try to be honest about what we know and what we don't know, and then turn all of this information into some fairly straightforward messaging around some of the things that work. So the work that you guys have been doing, really making sure that you're helping people remember the importance of social distancing, remember the importance of wearing those face coverings, doing these most basic activities turn out to be some of the most important work that we do as a city. So thank you again, for the opportunity, and really especially for all the work that you've been doing. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Awiti, for your service in Chicago and just nationwide. Now we'll move on to the Ask the Experts portion. These questions were asked ahead of time from our social distancing ambassadors. So for our first question, it comes from Brandon C. And he asks, what is the hardest part about effectively communicating public health information through multiple mediums to reach large audiences? And for example, press conferences, releases, and town halls. This is directed to Dr. Sabiti or Dr. Arwady. Either or can answer.
Okay, I can maybe start a little bit, because I was actually just talking about that. So I think one of the hardest parts is that it's important to have a good message that you can simplify language to a point where people can understand it without oversimplifying it so much that you are actually not sort of speaking the truth, or that you're not also being clear about the parts you're still learning about. So where we think about COVID, there have been different points during the outbreak as we learned more about it that some of the guidance even changes, right? You might remember early on, we were not recommending that people wear masks, right? And that's hard to remember given the work that you've all been doing this summer. But as we learned that COVID, different from some other diseases, so much of that spread can happen before people have symptoms, and that there are people who don't develop symptoms at all, but can spread COVID. It meant that we had to think not just about making sure people who have symptoms are staying home, although that remains very important, but recognizing that really everybody, even if you're feeling fine, if you've been out and about, it's possible that you could have COVID, and really having universal then masking so that people, even if you have COVID, you are doing everything you can to help prevent spread to others. And then as they're wearing masks, they're helping prevent spread to you. Where I think about the way we had to kind of change that messaging, you have to make sure that you're clear with people that you're not changing it just to change it. You're changing it based on additional things that we've learned about the outbreak. And you want to make sure that you're, again, being honest that we will continue to learn things. And that my job and all of our jobs is turning all of that into what somebody can do themselves, that makes them feel like they are in as much control as they can be in the outbreak. But I also want to be honest, it's an easier message to say, wear the mask because it helps protect you. But the more honest thing is that when you wear the mask, the main thing you're doing is helping keep your germs from coming out and infecting others. And when they wear their mask, it's helping them protect you. And so you want to be honest about that, and not just to try to get people to do the right thing. You don't want to risk compromising what we do know about the science. So I'm always, when I get questions that seem very straightforward, doing a lot of thinking about how do I stay honest to what we know, being honest about what we're still learning, and turn it into information that people can actually use and feel confident in. And that is hard, and it's different in all the different settings.
Thanks.
I mean, that's a terrific answer. I don't even know if it needs a follow-up. I mean, I think that I would just say that's spot on. And but it's the real pleasure of doing this work. I find so often that a lot of people who come out, like, it's so interesting watching a lot of our political leaders having conversations, and there's a lot of wishful thinking or a little bit of arrogance, or do it because I said so. And it's really, this is the moment in time where everyone needs to really up their humanity when the kind of life-threatening event that's happening is driving you to the worst instincts, right? So there's so much that's always pushing people to have their worst instincts, but we really actually have to up our humanity so much more. Think about the other person, think about the way that they're viewing the world, think what's important to them, don't dismiss their ideas. Even if somebody doesn't want to wear a mask, hear them out. Like, it is just really important to start a conversation. And I just think that's the fundamental thing that just often gets lost in this moment when we think it's just do what I said because I said so, where it's really about meeting people where they're at is so important.
Our next question comes from Oni W. And they asked, as a well-known public health officer for one of the largest cities in the world, how have you continued to find new ways to conquer the collective confusion surrounding this disease?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think collective confusion is a term partly because we've seen government officials at all different levels sometimes having pretty different messaging. And I would say, first of all, that where people are confused, that is coming from a true place, usually, of people wanting to understand how a disease spreads or how to protect themselves. There's a lot of information out there, and some of it is not very good information. But if you start from a point of wanting to hear, why does somebody believe something that I might know is not true? You can then, I think, have more of a productive conversation. So just to take an example, I do these Facebook Lives. At the beginning, we were doing them every single day. At this point, we do live, we take questions directly from the public a few times a week, and then I do some pre-recorded ones on the other days. So I've really gotten to see pretty directly the kinds of questions that people are asking, and those change over time. But I hear things that I know are absolutely not true, but people are asking them actually in a spirit of wanting to understand. So when I get a question like, somebody thinks that truly when we're going to be giving immunizations or vaccines against COVID, they want to know, how do I know that we're not putting trackers in people, that the government isn't going to be tracking people with those vaccines? My immediate reaction is like, oh my God, that's crazy. Like, of course we're not doing that. But when you think about it, like, where is that coming from, right? That's coming from a point of mistrust in government. There's a lot of history of ways that public health and medicine and governments have not always been straightforward. There's ways in which they have have done experimentation on people, sometimes without consent. There are ways in which, when you look back at the history, not all of it is good. And so when I hear this sort of thing, I think the goal is to really say, where are you getting that information? Why are you concerned about that? Let me explain to you a little bit about how vaccines come together, how I know as a doctor that when I give them to my patients, they're safe and what's in them, and then why I feel comfortable, why I will be taking the vaccine myself, and that there, in fact, not only is there not a technological way to do that, but there's no desire to do that. And I think just highlighting that it's also, this is the sort of thing that is not likely to be forced upon people. There probably will be settings where, if you want to participate in an activity or do something, there may be vaccine requirements, but it's not like the government is going to require everybody to get vaccinated. And so helping demystify a little bit of what is likely coming, but starting from a point of, that's an interesting question. That's not something that I've ever seen really in science or in the literature, but I can understand why you might be worried about this. We are following people who are getting testing, and we're not sharing that information. We're very careful with privacy, but people hear a lot about, you're tracking and you're doing this, and where that gets complicated with immunizations, I really need to work hard to make sure people understand why vaccines are safe, why vaccines are effective, how they're being tested, and that I have confidence that once one is available, it won't be tied up in some of these other myths. So it's social media, getting questions directly is good. Doing some of these town halls is good. I like getting emails, especially emails from people that I don't agree with at all, because it helps me think about how to better frame the messaging that I'm giving. But it's, and trying to keep up with the science myself. It's my job to know what is some of the latest research so I can base my answers in actual science. So that's some of what I try. And I read the news and I watch what leaders across the country and the world are saying, so that I can help translate some of that for people in Chicago. And again, so they know what that means in terms of risk.
Thank you. I kind of learned about the whole like ethical guidelines in my AP Psych class. So I was like, when you started talking about all of that, it took me back to like, where it wasn't ethical, like in the 90s and stuff like that. Thank you.
I mean, if people have, I'm presuming most of you at this point have probably learned about the Tuskegee experiments, for example,
That's
which
what came
were,
into my head.
that was the US government. And that was, absolutely, it was not treating Black men for syphilis when we had penicillin available and following forward to understand what that disease would look like. Like that would not go forward as research today. We've put a lot of protections in place, but the work that we do in public health comes from that history. And you've got to be honest about acknowledging a lot of the real failures that we've had in the ways in which that lack of trust comes from a real history that we want to be honest about, and then let people know the ways in which we are trying to protect against things like that from happening again.
Yeah, it's like a generation mistrust kind of. I just know this from my parents and their parents. They don't really trust doctors and stuff like that.
I mean, to be honest, it's history and it's current events. I mean, we haven't done a whole, it's not like that. We're not talking about ancient history, and and there's plenty of things that break down trust. I always often talk about the idea that viruses just expose and exploit the cracks in our society, right? That you throw on top of it all of the issues that we have, and you see them just expand in the middle of an outbreak when you have an insidious, deadly threat. I mean, an invisible, deadly threat on top of everything else. It's what you see. And it's interesting because we've been running Operation Outbreak for so many years, and we've seen protests and we've seen like military shootings. I mean, we see all of these things happen in the game too. And it's ultimately like, what kind of trust are you building right now? And so it's a daily activity to maintain that trust and to try to repair it, as we're going. And so, it's a real challenge.
Okay, thank you guys. So for our next question, it comes from Catalina TR. And she asked, as a student who is going back to college in the fall as an RA, what do you recommend we RA/students living in the halls do to stay safe while living in a shared space?
I'll try to take that one just because I'm on the Harvard University Track and Trace Committee, and I'm part of a team that's trying to bring back all of Colorado's schools right now. So that Scout app that I showed you is being used right now at Colorado Mesa University and is being rolled out next week at a number of districts, K through 12 districts throughout the state and beyond. And we have a lot of conversations about this. I mean, one, should we even come back to school? And there's the trade-off of schools versus, the what we lose when we don't go to school, and what we could lose amidst COVID. And I think that ultimately, one of the reasons Operation Outbreak is such a passion to us is every individual needs to be an agent of change and empowered to do something. I think kids can even congregate, right? If there's no COVID, and if you make sure there's no COVID in not only in your bubble of friends, but in the bubble of friends that surround your friends and the bubble of friends that surround those friends, like as long as there's no COVID anywhere in the area, you would be safe. If we actually could motivate these kids to be like, you can have that keg party you want to have if you track down every case in the city, like that's how we would get back. There's actually a lot of motivation and desire to get back. I also advise a number of some on the Sierra Leone's task force for reemergence, and we have to kind of give constant feedback on what to do here. And it worries me that we're talking about keeping kids wearing masks 6 feet apart for a year. I mean, have you met 7th and 8th graders? I'm not sure what, exactly we're talking about here. And ultimately, it's really important to be realistic about how people are going to exchange, be honest about what, that humans need humans. But if you are in a shared space, it's really important. Like, it's hard enough with your roommates negotiating, like, where'd my milk go? Let alone, why did you go to that party and not tell me? But that's where the hard work of building trust happens, right? Is that you need to trust the people you live with and you share a space with. And there are family units, they can exist. And that actually is the only way to make it possible. I mean, dorm rooms usually are there to pack kids in like sardines anyway. And if you actually had one kid in a dorm room, the campus would be like a quarter full or half full. If you could have even 4 kids in the same dorm room, it's just that they are now a unit tied to each other and that they have to be protecting each other. And so that to me is a lot of the conversations I have is around these pods who then have to act as a collective on each other's behalf. And that you should think of you want to keep building your trust layers out so that everybody is part of the same team. I think that it's, to me, so frustrating because this is a moment in which it could be a moment where communities come together and build together and create their community safe. But it isn't this now thing that when I hear different schools talk about the punitive model, and I'm just like, well, that's just one quick way to get people to not do what you're asking them, right? Because they're afraid that they're going to get suspended if they get caught with somebody. So of course they're going to lie to you. Like, don't do that. Like, let's all be honest where it's going on. Let's try to work together. So those are the parts, that's the hard work of trying to figure out how to do that. But, I recommend, in the very simple thing is just make good friends with your roommates, make sure they trust you, and make sure together you work towards a better way.
Thank you for that explanation, because I know a lot of students who are going to school are pretty scared and have chosen to stay home just because they're scared of like becoming sick and things like that. And I feel like you provided a second viewpoint from a different side, from a different perspective. So thank you for that. Our next question is from Stacy W. And she asks, what is the update on vaccines for the virus?
I can start just at a high level. Certainly, we continue to see progress. There's a lot of different vaccine candidates that are all being studied. And there are some that are in what's called the phase 3, sort of the big scale trials of vaccines. So whenever a vaccine is being developed, it starts with laboratory work and testing in animals, et cetera. And then once you start with humans, you first start with a very small number and you give it to just a few people. And you're mostly looking to understand, are there major safety problems, and to understand how much of a dose you might need. And if that is looking good, just in a few people, then you'll do a next phase of trial, which is in, maybe a few dozen to a few hundred people. Again, just very tight. You're looking to make sure, does this vaccine look like it could be effective? Again, really checking on safety. If all of that is looking good, you move to this phase 3, and that's when you really find out if a vaccine works. That's when you give it to thousands of people from all different backgrounds. You give it to younger people and older people. You give it to people from different parts of the country or the world, different race ethnicities, and then people who have different amounts of exposure to COVID. And so the idea in the gold standard is that you would, at the simplest level, basically you give half the people the vaccine and you give half the people a placebo, like a dummy vaccine, an injection that doesn't have any vaccine in it. And the person does not know if they got the vaccine or the dummy vaccine. And actually the doctor who's giving it doesn't know if the person got the vaccine or the dummy vaccine. And then you follow these thousands of people forward and you see how many people get COVID. Once enough people have gotten COVID, you can stop the study, and then you unblind it, and you actually look and see who got the real vaccine, who got the dummy vaccine. And hopefully, if the vaccine worked really well, in the group of people who got the vaccine, very few of those people, or none of those people even, got COVID, and all of your cases or more of your cases would be in the group that got the dummy vaccine. So it's sort of a how well does this work in the real world? And it gives you a much larger number of people that you can look for any potential side effects. Again, make sure it's safe, make sure it's working. So we've got a couple of different ones in the US here and some around the world that are in that larger phase now of trials. And there's a couple that are going here in Chicago, just for awareness. University of Illinois at Chicago, Northwestern University, both enrolling people right now for some of those phase 3 trials. So we'll see. Again, it's really important that folks understand that a vaccine will be available only when we know that it is safe and it is effective. There's been a lot of work to speed up the process, but lots of that has been around how things are manufactured and the red tape, et cetera. These trials do still need to happen. If you're in a setting where there's a lot of COVID, the trials can happen a little bit faster because more of the people who maybe got the dummy vaccine or the real vaccine could get COVID, and you can end the trial faster. Dr. Sabeti may have more up-to-date opinions than I do on timing. My sense is that we'll probably, it's going to be late this year to early next year would be my guess when we start to see a candidate available, meaning a vaccine that is working. We'll probably see multiple different kinds of vaccines that are working, but then it's going to be a long process to roll this out. Long. You have to do everything from how do you manufacture millions of doses to how do you keep this cold if it needs to be kept cold as you're moving it around. What does it actually look like to set up a way to vaccinate, millions of people in Chicago? How do you prioritize who gets vaccine first? How do you make sure you have a safety monitoring system on the back end so you're following up people? There's a good chance we may need 2 doses of vaccine, which makes all the logistics even more difficult. So at CDP, at the Chicago Department of Public Health, while we're sort of waiting on the science to see what develops, we're already doing lots and lots of planning for vaccination. We've bought syringes, we've made plans, but we're expecting that really all of 2021 is probably going to be about vaccinating people in Chicago. So the outlook is looking good in terms of this would be the fastest that we'd ever seen a new vaccine come to market, but it's going to be an enormous process to turn that vaccine into actually get it into people's arms. And there's a good chance it won't be 100% protective either. It will just help in terms of limiting the risk of serious COVID. So that was a pretty long answer, but I'm sure Dr. Sabeti has additional information.
Actually, Alison, that was terrifically, that was really great. I don't even know if I have anything to add. I mean, I can tell you specifics if you're like, what is the Moderna vaccine, or there's all the different vaccines, but that was a terrific roundup. Yeah, can listen to you all day. So.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I thought the question was simple. Okay, so our next question is from Yesenia S. And she asked, maybe he won't, okay. She asked, how devastating would the effects be if the virus began to mutate, and what might that cause? And what might cause that? And what might the mutation look like?
So yeah, I can take this one just because that is what we're looking for all the time. And the fact of the matter is there's a lot of the virus. It's not like if it begins to mutate, it's mutating. It mutates every time it replicates. That's what genomes do. They sort of change over time at a very slow rate, but it allows you to sort of see what's going on. Viruses actually have a much higher rate than most things. They mutate very, very quickly. This virus, not so much compared to something else like flu, but fast enough that you should be concerned. And we've already seen hundreds of mutations pop up in this virus's genome. Thousands of millions have probably happened just with every infection. There's new mutations popping up, but we've seen hundreds that have actually gotten prevalent enough that we're seeing them. And there's one particular mutation that a lot of people are talking about. It's called D614G. It's basically a amino acid change, a protein change in the spike protein of the virus that's really important in how it infects cells. And it looks like it's changed in a way that could be meaningful. And I'm part of a research paper that just came out, one of a number of groups who noticed this mutation. We noticed it back in February and immediately took note because it looked like it might change the biology of the virus. And our data that Jeremy Lubin is the lead of our team has found that essentially it looks like it increases how infectious the virus is, and changes the structure of the protein. We saw this actually, Jeremy and I started working together during the Ebola outbreak when we took note of another mutation that was in another kind of gene that is important for infectivity. And we have evidence that that mutation also increased its infectivity. If you think about it, viruses, they're not planning it out. They're not mapping it out, just lots of mutations pop up. But any mutation that would make a virus more infectious and to spread more easily is then going to spread more easily and become more common. And so the D614G mutation, as was the mutation in Ebola, ended up since the moment it emerged, it went on skyrocketed to high prevalence. And so we see everywhere in the world that we have data, we see that the D614G mutation rose to what we call fixation, almost became the only game in town. And so that mutation just makes it that it's probably spreading. More of these sort of super spreader possibilities might be because of that. And that's one effect. But the interesting thing about evolution is that it kind of can go anywhere. Most mutations don't matter, a few of them might, and over time things can change. And that's sort of why I say it's like you can't rest on your laurels. People who, there's many reasons why you shouldn't say, oh, this doesn't really affect my age group or something like that. I mean, we should do it because we're a community, but also because you never know what virus you're going to be dealing with. And so if we don't move fast, not only do we get many, many more cases we have to contend with, but we may have a totally different virus that we're dealing with. And we saw that already happen here, and it can happen again. We're seeing we're giving this virus more opportunities to transmit from human to human than it's ever had before. And, in every one of those transmission events is the possibility that something will change.
And I would just add, that was really interesting. I would just add that always when we see a lot of mutations, just means a lot of change within the virus, you run the risk that you've created a vaccine against a particular strain of that virus. And if it mutates enough, good mutation, bad mutation, just anything that makes it different, it means that the vaccine that you've created would not be as effective because there would be strains out there it wouldn't be against. And so if we were to see a lot more mutations happening, it would mean that we would probably need to be creating additional vaccines. And maybe every year you'd need to be making another vaccine. And, it all has to do with sort of this ongoing sort of fight between what's happening in the virus side and what are we developing to try to stop it on this side. So there's lots of scientists who are looking at this really closely all around the world, and where we see those changes, thinking about what does that mean for how sick people might get, how quickly it might spread, and for basic things like making the vaccine, whether that might, what that could mean in a long-term way. We've only known about COVID, right, for 6-7 months at this point. So there's a lot that's still happening in terms of the changing virus.
Our last question comes from Deja C, and she asks, what inspired you to pursue your current career path?
I can start on that briefly. I think, I know a lot of you are in high school or sort of earlier in college and maybe not quite sure what you want to do. And I want you to know that that's how I was when I was your age. I really was not sure what I wanted to do. And I tried a number of things along the way. I worked as a substitute teacher. I worked as a travel guide writer. I worked helping sort of edit science and medical writing. I worked in an exercise laboratory in a hospital, and through all of this, sort of decided that I wanted to be in medicine, and I had decided that I was going to go to medical school. But then what actually happened is I took an epidemiology class. Epidemiology, again, is just the sort of the science of public health. It's how diseases spread. And I just thought it was the most interesting thing that I had ever learned. Like, I'd had a lot of school at that point, but I took this class and I was like, this is fascinating. And it was almost just an extra class that I was taking sort of for fun. And then I took another class and it was about public health law. It was about why do we treat HIV and tuberculosis differently in the law and in the way we think about regulations across borders. And basically, I just took a couple of these classes and I was fascinated. And I basically said, you know, I liked medicine and I still enjoy seeing patients. I'm glad I did that training, but the sort of big picture science thinking of public health, how diseases spread, and then how as a society we react to them. Once I found that, not everybody gets excited about epidemiology. So I think, you know, my advice would be when you find something that you get really excited about, that not everybody gets excited about, that's probably potentially a good career path for you to be doing some more exploring in and thinking down the line. Because once I sort of figured that out, then it was straight sailing and I kind of knew what I wanted to do and was able to, you know, move that into different opportunities.
Yeah, that's awesome. So mine was sort of the different thing. I'm an immigrant, and my dad, one day he loves to kind of joke that he sort of was like, you can be anything you want to be in the world, a doctor or a lawyer, you know, just the world is your oyster. Just you know, you can choose. And my sister became a lawyer, and I became a doctor, but neither of us practiced like our field. But I think essentially I was going to go to medical school, and that was sort of blinders on, that was what was happening. But along the way, did a bunch of research to do my pre-med requirements and all of that. And just fell in love with research and just realized that was much more where my mind was. In research, you get to explore and kind of go all over the place and kind of into these different areas. And it was just fun for me. I think it was much more fit my personality. And a lot of people don't realize how much community there is in science too, and how much it is like it's this team sport. And I love that. I never actually thought, I don't even know if I would have known this is like, never thought of this as a job. Honestly, like Persian culture is a funny one where there's certain things that are super, and being a refugee, I think also just changes that, where everyone wants you to have that stable job. And even professor doesn't seem like a stable enough job for some, but it really was just finding exactly where it's that thing that I think, as Alison said, that thing that like only you should be doing and it just fits you, but it also just very much like fits your personality, the way, how do you want to, a lot of people make their decisions about what they want to be on based on external values. Like I saw Grey's Anatomy and I want to be that, or I like to see myself doing that, and they picture themselves doing something where a lot of it, some of that matters, but a lot of it's from the inside, just, do I want to, like in medicine, there's a lot of small talk. And I love people, but I hate small talk. I actually realized a lot of the things about the life of a doctor doesn't fit my personality. I'm always asking too many questions. In medicine, you have to be very regimented in what you do to some degree, and you have to be there at a certain time and leave at a certain time, where the way my life works is just much more fitted to research. And I found that a lot of people realize later in life that the thing that they were doing is not how they want to exactly spend their day. So the more you can kind of live in that moment, that is also really helpful.
Can I ask a quick question before we start to wrap up?
Sure.
Who are your musical influences?
Who are my musical influences, or is that anyway
But starting with you.
Oh, okay, sure, yeah. Well, I mean, I have a lot. That's the whole thing. If you're a musician, like it's because you just love music, and I love like every kind of all types of music. Back in the day, kind of probably my formative moments, some of my favorite bands, like I talk about, probably the first album I ever bought was New Order, Substance, on my own, like of my own volition, although I like Blondie and Michael Jackson and things like that back when I was younger. But the first album where I was like, I'm going to go out to the store and buy that was New Order, Substance. 9 Inch Nails, Pretty Hate Machine got me through the last 6 weeks, or last period of my PhD. But I remember that last 6 weeks I was trying to get everything done before I started medical school. Yeah, I had Pretty Hate Machine on literally a loop 24 hours a day, all day. It was like, that was just, I couldn't, if it was not on, I didn't know what to do with myself. So those are some, and more recently, I was obsessed with a band called Frightened Rabbit. There's a lot of different ones, but I'm all over the place. But
Dr. A?
Music would not be my area of major talent. My sister is actually a singer. She makes her living as a professional singer, and she got like all the music interests and all the musical talent. So I got other inspirations, but music for me is not one of the major ones. Sorry to disappoint.
Not at all. I'm fascinated by you guys having this conversation. I hope everyone else watching is. It's really it's really cool, and we're all closet COVID experts and pandemic experts to some degree now. We're so inundated with it, yet I still found myself learning from both of you in that back and forth. So thank you for being smart and being knowledgeable, but being able to translate it into sort of layman speak, because it was really easy to understand you guys. As a former quick biology major and frustrated lawyer who's in Park and Rec field, which is by far the best field for all you guys studying out there. It doesn't pay great, but it really is rewarding, let me tell you.
Thank you. Thank you guys so much for your time as panelists. We really appreciate it. And now I'm going to turn this over to Tim.
All right, thank you very much. We're winding down, but this is a really important portion. I want to thank our panelists, everybody who joined us. We have a couple real important announcements though. As all the social distancing ambassadors are aware, we did talk about a 7th week and an optional week that would enable you to be trained as contact tracers. So we do have some exciting news, and Veronica Seck from the Malcolm X College, who's director of health worker program, is going to talk to us about what is contact tracing and what exactly is the training about. Before we invite all of you to participate, I wanted you to hear a little bit more. So I'm going to turn it over to Veronica. Veronica, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me on. First of all, speaking to the ambassadors, I'm so proud to hear that you guys have been involved in a piece of a greater initiative towards stopping the spread of COVID-19. As social distancing ambassadors, that is such important work, so thank you. And now you're gonna have the chance to learn about another piece of the initiative, so I'm super excited to announce today to you guys that Malcolm X College will be offering you the training in contact tracing, so you can have the skills and knowledge to continue making a difference in your community. Contact tracing involves identifying people who have been exposed, and contact tracers will reach out to exposed contacts, educate them, connect them to resources so they can prevent the further spread of the disease and the virus. So in our training, you'll not only learn about the COVID-19 spread, but you'll also learn the steps of contact tracing. You'll also apply them to different scenarios and strengthen your communication skills so you can ensure to be effective and help as many people as possible get the accurate and vital information that they need. So this skill set you'll be able to apply in your life right now and in the future, because communication is key. I feel like that's been said multiple times today, that communication is so important, and especially being able to navigate that in different populations. So thank you so much for having me on. We're excited to partner with the Chicago Youth Service Corps and all of the social distancing ambassadors. You'll receive more information soon about how to sign up.
All right, thank you very much, Veronica. Appreciate you joining us today. That's great news for the city of Chicago, the Chicago Park District. We're going to partner with Malcolm X. Again, more information on how to join this program will be coming very soon. But our next guest is here, Phaedra Leslie. She's from the Chicago Cook Workforce Partnership. And Phaedra's going to talk about the opportunities that are available. Now, keep in mind, just because you get a contact tracing certificate does not mean you get a job. But if you get a contact tracing certificate and you've been a social distancing ambassador as part of the Chicago Youth Service Corps and a Park District employee, we do think that that would give you a pretty good opportunity maybe to be an effective contact tracer. But for more information on contact tracing and what the opportunities are going to be, I'm going to turn it over to Phaedra Leslie with the Chicago Cook Workforce Partnership.
Thank you so much, Tim. It's good to see you and everyone else. Hi, everybody. So lots of conversation on contact tracing. This is very exciting, particularly because Chicago Cook Workforce Partnership was recently awarded as the lead organization for the Chicago Contact Tracing Corps. And that includes partners like Malcolm X, so hi Veronica, NORC, the University of Illinois at Chicago School of Public Health, and Sinai Urban Health Institute. So along with our partners working collaboratively with the Chicago Public Department of Health, we will be recruiting for contact tracers. So it's a very good time to get connected to Malcolm X training because they're our partner in our Earn and Learn program along the pathway for healthcare careers and allied health. So if you're very much interested, like Tim said, Veronica said, and all of the wonderful questions that have been answered related to COVID-19, we'll be recruiting on our website. It's called shytracing.com. So CHITRACING careers and allied health. So .com. So that website is where you can fill out a form. It's in English and Spanish currently. If you click on your preference of language and then the green button for next, you will be able to fill out an interest form. So we do have a little bit background information. We talk about community impact and how this process works. And then at the very bottom, you'll start to fill out an interest form for the Chicago COVID Contact Tracing Corps. So happy to be on here, happy to, I don't know that there'll be any questions specifically related to this, but I will tell you, we are not hiring directly. We are gathering interest to be able to share with the 30 CBOs, community-based organizations who will do the direct hiring. So these positions will pay a minimum of $20 an hour, and the supervising tracers will get paid $24 an hour, and these positions will have benefits. So it's a good opportunity to sign up right now, get your name on the wait list, fill out the interest form so that once we determine who our community-based organizations will be, then when they start recruiting, they have a list that includes your name. And if you've already gone through the Malcolm X training, that will be an advantage. Anything else? I want to thank you all for listening. Thanks, Dan, for popping up the website so everybody could see it. Tim, is there anything else you need?
No, Phaedra, that's great. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Again, we have the opportunity to be trained by the Malcolm X program, and we'll be sending information out to all social distancing ambassadors as to how to register within our platform to then be eligible and go over the requirements that are needed. And again, that's week 7. We have one more day in person tomorrow, and then we have a virtual week next week. We're going to be completing our capstone projects for the Chicago Youth Service Corps. And I'm going to turn it back over to our youth moderators. I want to thank them both very much for their help today as we conclude the program. I'm turning it over to Kayla and Kyra.
Thank you so much for this opportunity and telling us about this new opportunity that we can put our name down for. Now we have a message from our mayor.
Hello, I'm Mayor Lori Lightfoot, and I'm here with a very important message for our 2020 social distance ambassadors. I know this summer wasn't what you expected, and I understand the pain of losing the summer you planned. But because of you, we are that much closer to ensuring we can have those summers again. Thank you for the hard work you've done to encourage people to socially distance and wear a mask. By now, I'm sure you've run into those hard-headed people who just won't listen. Don't be discouraged. We must keep going and get the word out because lives truly depend on it. I'm proud of you for all taking on this challenge, proving that public safety and public health should be everyone's priority, no matter their age. Chicago's youth is known for being resilient. That's why, thanks to your participation in the SDA program, Chicago is the only city in the country that's encouraging young people like you in the response to COVID-19. This virus isn't going to go away magically. We need your collaboration, which will make a difference as we slow the spread of this disease. And we are so honored to work alongside you. I want to take this moment to also acknowledge the Clara Lionel Foundation and the Broad Institute for their support. Without them, this program would not have been possible. Thank all of you for the work you do in this effort. And please remember to stay safe.
Thank you, Lori Lightfoot, for that video. So now for closing remarks, we have Tim O'Connell.
All right, again, it's been a great afternoon. Thank you all for joining in. Just a couple reminders to our social distancing ambassadors. We have one more day of in-person work. That's tomorrow. Next week is virtual. We'll be sending you information on week 7 contact tracing. That's a paid opportunity to get trained as a contact tracer. Before we get out of here, I want to thank our funder, the Clara Lionel Foundation. I want to thank the Chicago Park District, Courtney Pallamore and Colleen Lammel for their help behind the scenes. I want to thank also from the mayor's office, Sarish Salim and Daniel Yao for putting this together. And lastly, our moderators today, Kayla and Kyra, and also to all of you, the social distancing ambassadors, thank you so much. Here's the deal. If we do what we're supposed to do, next year you'll be rec leaders and lifeguards. But as you told me yesterday, you're going to do it differently because you know the importance of keeping distance and doing what we need to do to stay safe. So thank you, everybody. And thanks for coming out.